Welcome to Control Alt Society podcast. The source material we are looking at today, it raises a really fundamental alarm about a condition now being called culture without creators. And this isn't just about, some automated content here and there. It's about a total saturation, an algorithmic flood of AI-generated output on every platform that, it fundamentally challenges how human creativity can even gain value and visibility anymore.
Right. That synthetic saturation is the new baseline. It's completely redefining the economic reality for human creators. So I think the central question for us today is, how do humans stand out again in this kind of environment? Does addressing this crisis mean we have to fundamentally redefine what we even consider valuable human culture? A complete paradigm shift moving the goalposts entirely? Or is the solution more about refining our existing systems, our evaluation, our verification, our curation? Essentially, just building better markers and filters for quality?
I'm firmly in the camp that a fundamental redefinition is, it's non-negotiable. The sheer scale of the problem demands what the source calls a human renaissance. We absolutely have to shift the focus away from the aesthetic product and onto verifiable human intent and the creative process itself. Because, let's be honest, the competition over the product, it's already lost to the machine.
See, I come at it from a different angle. I believe the core aesthetic and intellectual values that have defined great human culture for centuries, they remain intact. The focus shouldn't be on redefining the very nature of culture. It should be on creating sophisticated markers of provenance and quality that allow superior human work to navigate this synthetic mess and, truly stand out again.
Okay, so my core thesis is this. The sheer scale and the speed of the algorithmic flood renders traditional markers, craftsmanship, aesthetic novelty, it renders them economically obsolete for establishing human value. Just, think about any creative niche. Let's say graphic design or ambient music. If an AI can instantly generate 10,000 aesthetically perfect, market-optimized outputs for that niche, the human who spent 3 months perfecting one single output, they cannot compete. Not on speed, not on scale, not on maximized appeal. The human creator loses the output competition immediately. So the cultural economy has to fundamentally shift its valuation model. We need to start valuing the things that AI simply cannot replicate. Verifiable authenticity, the documentable history of human struggle that's embedded in the process, ethical sourcing of an idea, and that unique, non-optimized vulnerability. To preserve human relevance, we have to abandon these product-based metrics, which AI has mastered, and embrace a new definition of culture that's centered on human experience and provenance. This cultural shift, I think, is the only real path toward that human renaissance.
I absolutely acknowledged the reality of the flood. It is overwhelming, yes. But I maintain that high-quality human cultural output still has an intrinsic aesthetic and intellectual value that algorithmic mass production just fundamentally lacks. AI generates efficient pastiches, right? It rarely, if ever, generates those genuine, disruptive creative leaps that redefine a genre.
But can those leaps be seen?
Well, that's the point. The problem isn't one of intrinsic worth. It's one of visibility and verification. We don't need a radical redefinition of what culture is, because the metrics of excellence, they still apply. What we need is a better infrastructure to apply those metrics. The solution lies in creating sophisticated new markers for content, focusing heavily on verified originality, detailed provenance tracking, and this is crucial, expert human curation. These are the defensive mechanisms, the filters, that allow genuinely superior human work to stand out again from all that synthetic noise. We need clearer definitions of what is genuinely human originality to navigate this age, not a lowering of the aesthetic bar.
I see why you'd think that, this belief that intrinsic quality will just naturally rise to the top. But we have to address the economic reality of scale and attention. How can you claim traditional metrics are just waiting for a refinement when the volume of AI output fundamentally changes the entire economic landscape? We're not talking about subtle aesthetic differences here. We're talking about the total evaporation of the opportunity for human work to even gain traction.
But true human creative innovation, the conceptual breakthrough, the aesthetic leap,
That is precisely what AI struggles to achieve because it's just optimizing for existing patterns in its training data. So by definition, that novelty will inherently stand out regardless of the digital noise. I mean, think of cultural shifts like the rise of photography or mass printing. They caused a crisis of volume, sure, but the truly innovative work, it eventually found its audience. It maintained its value because the quality was just undeniable. The market recognizes true ingenuity given enough time.
That's an interesting parallel, though I would frame it differently. You're focusing on the potential for distinct quality. I'm focused on the opportunity for that quality to be seen and valued in a transactionally viable way. The sheer volume changes the economic game completely. If all available attention, all algorithmic feeds, all transactional platforms are just occupied by the AI deluge, the opportunity for human work to gain traction, to be valued, to be paid for, it evaporates. If human creation stars because it can't get any visibility against near infinite competitors, its intrinsic quality becomes frankly moot in the cultural marketplace. The human creative act just becomes a hobby. It's not a cultural driver anymore, unless its value is defined completely outside that competitive arena of optimized output.
So if you're focused on that economic evaporation, let's turn that on its head for a second. If we do choose to focus on process and provenance, what does that actually mean for the quality of the output? You're arguing that for humans to stand out, we have to focus on process, authenticity, ethical commitment, struggle, and that this is where the value must lie now.
Precisely, yes. If the process is verifiable, if the provenance is authenticated through, say, a digital ledger, then the value accrues to the human actor. It doesn't matter if a machine can produce an aesthetically similar result instantly and for pennies. We have to start valuing the documented commitment alongside the result. This moves creation from a simple transaction of output to a testament of human experience. And that shift is what protects the creator, by defining their value outside the output economy.
I understand the economic pressure. I really do. But I struggle with that conclusion. Culture has always been defined by its enduring merit and its aesthetic impact, by the product. We celebrate Shakespeare not because he documented his struggle with a quill pen. We celebrate him because of the quality of the drama and its lasting impact. Valuing process over product, it risks creating what I would call a human ghetto, a sort of protected zone where content is appreciated only because a human made it, regardless of its quality or its cultural significance. It fundamentally lowers the bar for what we call culture just to make sure the creator still has a role.
See, I disagree fundamentally that valuing provenance is lowering the bar. It's changing the metric of the competition. If we can verify that a piece of music was composed through conscious, dedicated human commitment involving years of skill and ethical labor, that verification adds a cultural value that is inherently distinct from an optimized instant algorithmic pastiche. For instance, in visual art, this means valuing the artist's specific, documented emotional journey, their technical inefficiency even, over the resulting image's Instagram viability. The bar isn't lower, it's just moved to a domain where only humans can successfully compete.
But this valuation based on effort and documented biography, it risks replacing quality with biographical validation. What happens if that verifiable human truth is, well, aesthetically mediocre? If we accept this redefinition, aren't we conditioning the audience to accept lower quality output simply because it came with a good story and a verified ledger? That feels like it's turning culture into a transaction of ethical consumption rather than an exchange of artistic ideas.
But it is absolutely about consumption. We are already consumers of ethical choices in food and clothing, where people pay a premium for verifiable labor practices. Why should culture be exempt from that? The human renaissance idea suggests that the consumer has to learn to value the source of the output, treating it as an ethical choice to sustain human creative labor, even if the difference in the aesthetic product is negligible compared to the optimized AI output. If the aesthetic bar is now set by systems operating at infinite scale, well, insisting on that bar just means the machine always wins the output competition. We have to redefine the competition itself.
Okay, let's pivot back to the filtering mechanism for a moment, because I think this is where the human element remains paramount without abandoning aesthetic merit. If the primary issue is filtering the flood,
then doesn't the act of curation, the human selection, the validation, the contextualization of content, doesn't that become the highest form of cultural labor? This keeps the focus squarely on assessing quality.
But who are the curators?
Well, think about the sheer impossibility of navigating streaming services without expert human intervention. The power now lies with the museum acquisition teams, the dedicated critics, the playlist editors on the major platforms. They are the essential human filters. They use their judgment and their expertise to cut through the noise and elevate the content that actually merits our attention. This is a vital, irreplaceable human function that validates the original human act through its merit.
Curation is undoubtedly vital. I'm not denying that. It's a necessary function for an audience to navigate anything. But let's consider the power dynamics that creates, particularly when the source is worried about a culture without creators. If curation is suddenly declared the highest form of cultural labor, then the human creator is just relegated to supplying raw material for the filter. What's their fate then?
Their fate is that their output, if it possesses true merit and exhibits genuine aesthetic or conceptual novelty, is elevated by expert human judgment, the curator's effort and judgment. That becomes the ultimate marker of quality. It acts as a sophisticated technical defense against the algorithmic deluge. We need to focus resources on empowering these human gatekeepers.
But if the filter holds all the highest economic and cultural value, then the original human creative act is functionally devalued. The creator becomes a kind of subsistence laborer just hoping to win the lottery of a curator's attention. This, for me, confirms the need for a radical shift in definition that respects the originating human act, its struggle, its intent, its vulnerability, so that the creator holds value before the filter is ever applied. We have to create cultural value at the source. Otherwise, we implicitly accept the marginalization of the originating creator in favor of the person who comes in later to evaluate.
That may be true from the perspective of the individual creator's validation, but focusing on the filter allows us to preserve the definition of cultural excellence. Focusing on the process risks diluting that excellence into something that is merely verified human effort rather than meaningful culture. The solution is verification technology supporting human judgment, not a total redefinition of our cultural aspiration.
And I still contend that a purely technological and structural defense is just insufficient when you're facing an economic and aesthetic flood of this magnitude. The algorithmic saturation forces a fundamental cultural reset. To initiate a necessary human renaissance, the human has to shift focus to authenticity and provenance, establishing a non-competitive domain of value, not just aesthetic output.
And I will restate my position that the core principles of aesthetic and intellectual merit should not be abandoned simply because AI makes mimicry cheap and scalable. The challenge is structural and it's technical, developing verifiable markers and empowering human curation to allow quality human work to successfully break through the flood and stand out again. We have to focus on elevating the best human work, not simply redefining culture to include any effort made by a human regardless of its ultimate merit.
And therein lies the tension, doesn't it? Between valuing the source or investing everything we have in refining the selection.
Indeed. It's a critical issue for creators and consumers alike in this algorithmic age, and it demands thoughtful engagement. It shows that both redefining cultural value entirely and rigorously refining the filters we apply to our existing value structures, well, they both offer compelling, credible paths forward based on the evidence presented in the human renaissance in an algorithmic age.